Welcome, Brothers of the Imperium, to the ultimate beginner's guide for Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2. By the end of this guide, you'll know what you need to do to be able to complete even the hardest difficulty operations so you can get those sweet relic tier weapons. Even though the game has been out for about a month now, I wanted to create this guide for any newer players coming in after release and for players that are having a rough time getting through the harder difficulties. Many people are trying to get their weapons upgraded to relic tier, but having a tough time getting through substantial and ruthless difficulty operations. Got tips for you here, so sit down, grab a drink, and get ready to learn some Space Marine 2 tips. Tip 1. Parry. Learn to parry as many attacks as you can. Parry opens up gun strikes, which do good damage. Anytime you successfully parry, you become invincible for a brief moment, which can really help you stay alive in crazy situations. The parry itself does good damage too, and every time you parry a blue circle attack, you get an armor bar back. If you're facing a very large horde, you'll want to be on the edge of the horde and slowly walk backward into open space behind you and parry the enemy attacks as they come in. This will help you avoid being surrounded. Getting surrounded makes it very chaotic and difficult to stay alive. Shoot or mix in quick melee attacks in between, but don't go crazy on the melee attacks. That can get you hit if you overcommit. Don't get backed up against the wall, and keep a little bit of space in between you and the horde so you have time to get your parries off. Have you ever noticed when you get hit, it seems like it causes you to get hit a lot more right after the initial hit you took? I've noticed that there seems to be some kind of hit stun debuff that gets applied to you whenever you take a hit, and your blocks and parries don't register during this time. Right after you take a hit, to avoid taking extra hits, dodge back away from the enemies if you can, and that will let your hit stun reset, and then you can go back to blocking and parrying like normal. Tip 2. Learn the objectives. If both you and your teammates don't know the objective, a lot of health and ammo can be wasted because enemy waves spawn on timers, and you'll keep getting wave after wave if you're not completing the objectives. Also, you don't need to kill every enemy on the map. For example, on Inferno, the first map, at the part where you need to scan the dead bodies for the codes, if you find the codes on the first couple guys, you don't need to fight all the waves and run all the way back into the cave. Just hightail it out of there and run to the objective point to start the next area. Don't tunnel vision on fighting enemies during objectives. Make sure you're safe and dealing with threats, but also stay focused on completing the objective. On the first map, Inferno, I always see people fighting random enemies instead of defending the generators, and I've lost runs that were going well because the generators blew up. Tip 3. Know your weapons. Each weapon has different characteristics that can be unclear when you're starting off. Melee weapons have either block, balanced, or fencing. If they have block, they can't parry, so you won't do damage when perfect parrying an enemy attack, but usually the trade-off is these weapons do much higher damage and cleave. Balanced weapons still can parry, but have a less forgiving parry window, and their damage and cleave is pretty good, but not as good as block-only weapons. Fencing weapons don't do great attack damage or cleave, but they have a much more forgiving parry window. This class of weapons is usually the best for beginners because you can just hit parry as soon as you see a blue circle and it'll parry it no problem. Balanced tier weapons, you need better timing. Fencing weapons can also more easily parry regular attacks that don't have blue circles, so get used to hitting that parry button. In the recent 3.0 patch, they made the parry window a little less good on fencing weapons, but it's still the best compared to block and balanced in my opinion. Each gun also has different characteristics. In general, bolt guns do lower damage compared to melta and plasma weapons. The bolt guns have a hit scan attack, which means wherever your crosshair is right when you press the shoot button, you'll hit that target. Plasma weapons have projectile tags, meaning the bullet has a travel time between your gun and the target, so if the target moves before your plasma bullet reaches them, it's going to miss and do no damage. In general, guns that don't need to aim down sights are safer because you can keep a better eye on your surroundings. In the higher difficulties, 1 or 2 hits can wipe out most of your health and armor, so limiting vision can be dangerous. My favorite weapons are still accurate when hip firing, allowing me to pop off headshots without limiting my vision. If you want to have your gun be accurate without aiming down sights, look for weapons that have perks that decrease the spread. Recoil does have some effect when hip firing, but the spread stat is really what mostly affects hip firing accuracy. Tip 4. Use your class ability. Don't forget to use your class ability. In story mode, it's Titus's Fury mode, which allows you to get back health anytime you hit a target. In multiplayer operations, each class has a different ability and they can be very useful in many different situations. It's better to use your ability often rather than trying to save it for that perfect moment, because failed runs tend to happen because your health was whittled down over the course of a mission and you die a death of 1,000 cuts rather than one encounter completely wiping you out from full health and armor to 0. Tip 5. Target enemy weak points. This can be tricky on controller compared to mouse and keyboard, but try to get as many headshots as you can. The headshot bonus in this game is significant, and it can be the difference between killing an enemy in 10 shots versus 20 or more. It'll save you ammo and decrease your time to kill, which will give enemies less chance to damage you. Tip 6, learn enemy attack patterns. This mainly applies to Majoris and higher level enemies. Once you know the enemy attack patterns, you can parry their attacks and open them up for gun strike counters or further attacks. Knowing attack patterns can also help you stay alive longer by avoiding damage as much as possible and getting in those clutch blocks and parries. Knowing things like 3 energy waves come out of the Hive Tyrant when he does the green bubble, or whip Hormigons always do the 2-part whip attack will help you know when you need to block and parry. Tip 7, survival. Anytime you're low on armor, make sure you get ready to mash the execution button whenever an enemy gets damaged enough to enter the execution state. One lesser known tip I found is don't roll towards an execution unless you're actually needing to dodge, because the execution command doesn't queue up mid-roll, and if a teammate is nearby, they may get to that execution you needed while you're in the middle of your roll. Another lesser known tip is the execution command actually has a pretty wide range, so you can be somewhat far away from the enemy and still trigger the execution sequence. Your Space Marine will enter an invincible state and jog over to the enemy and then perform the execution. This has helped me dodge attacks by triggering the execution sequence on a nearby enemy, and it can help you make sure you get a needed execution in time before anyone accidentally takes it. Make sure if your armor is filled up and your teammates are hurting, you're being a good battle brother and letting them get the executions they need too. It's what the Emperor would want. Tip 8. Learn the maps. Learn the relic locations. You can look up guides online to learn the locations of the Guardian relics. They have a few different spawn points in each level, and they give you an extra life, which can be huge in boss battles. When looking up guides for relic and armory data locations, just focus on learning one level at a time, because if you read the whole guide, you probably won't remember any of the locations. But if you just focus on one level, you'll learn the locations a lot faster. Then you can learn the next level you want to work on. Same goes for learning to complete missions on higher difficulties. Keep playing the same level until you have it mastered, and you can get through the mission pretty consistently. Each level has its own challenges you have to learn, so it's better to just practice it until you learn to get through it, and then you can move on to another level. Make sure you break any ammo boxes that you see. Boxes sometimes randomly have stim packs for healing, which can make a huge difference. And then also make sure you're using your grenades. Levels have tons of grenade refills, and grenades can actually make a pretty big difference in battle, so it doesn't make sense to just hold on to them forever. Tip 9, keep it moving. Don't dilly-dally around too long, because hordes of enemies are late for a date and they're not going to wait around for you. They'll just keep spawning in, so the longer you take, the more enemies you'll have to fight, so just keep it moving. Tip 10, teammates. If you notice one of your teammates is strong and playing well, stick close to them. Having a strong teammate nearby can help you overpower stronger enemies that can catch you off guard, like the Lictor. Sometimes people wander off on their own and they end up getting overwhelmed. Bonus tip: if you want to solo operations and just play with bots, if you're having a hard time getting through an operation, reset the op until you get the heavy class bot on your team. They absolutely shred in terms of damage, and that can really help you out. Alright, so to summarize everything at the end here, I would say the absolute most important things for getting through the harder difficulties is you have to learn to kite large hordes. So if big hordes are coming at you, you need to like back up and kind of like lead them to you so that they don't all ball up and surround you, because once they're all right on top of you and you're surrounded, it can just be really hard to stay alive. So do your best to not let that happen. And then while you're backing up and they're attacking you still, just get those parries off. And when you parry, you're going to do big damage to whatever you parried, so you're just going to start whittling them down slowly, and that's basically how you beat the big hordes. You just kind of like kite them around and parry as they're coming at you, and that's how you're going to stay alive. And the next important thing is just to actually learn the objectives for yourself, and don't always depend on your teammates to complete them for you, because the better you know them, you can actually get them completed a lot more efficiently. And a lot of the time it'll save runs, because people are just like not really like focusing and making it take a long time. So if you just like haul ass and get those objectives done, like you'll find that you actually complete a lot more runs. And for any of you veteran players out there, let me know some of the tips that you do to complete missions on harder difficulties. If I didn't mention something, feel free to drop it in the comments, because I'm always open to learn more and hear people's strategies. All right, that's it, guys. Thanks so much for watching. And if you found anything useful on the video, drop a like on it for me.